not to say that this was the reason the show was created, but a big thing behind the show, all the conversation surrounding the show for the last couple of months, has been revolving around CM Punk, who was noticeably absent from the graphic, from the upfronts, from the press release, until he wasn't. I mean, actually, he was in the press release, and they removed the name, apparently. That was caught by someone. Connor Casey of comicbook.com asked Warner or someone from the network about Punk, and they said he will not be associated with this show. And obviously, they're not going to say that he is if he's not on the graphic. That makes no sense. I still think there's a pretty good chance he will be, but the latest report, and it just... This whole situation continues to get messier and messier by the week, but the report indicated from PW Insider, among other sources, that the holdup with Punk coming back to do this show and why he wasn't there yesterday was because he wants Ace Steel with him back in AEW, and apparently they either said yes initially and then said no, or just said no in general, and that's why he has issues currently. They're back at odds for the time being. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. Listen, I've gone back and forth as far as, I'm not on anyone's side here. I just kind of recognize the situation for what it is, and I think that a lot of people are to blame. Pretty much everyone involved is to blame. But bringing back Ace Steel is nothing but a negative, in my opinion. The guy just serves no real purpose. He's a liability for them. Fucking biting someone is inexcusable. The fighting thing was one thing. Biting someone is just beyond dumb. He is not needed back. So before I go any further, Mr. Marceau, talk about the Punk situation, the update on him, and what role he plays in all of this, and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very bizarre. I mean, honestly, I've never been the biggest Punk guy. Coming from, like, what we've seen so far, I mean, it seems like he's, like, the biggest pain in the ass to work with. I mean, if he's going to come back and he gets mad, like, I feel like this whole time it's like, oh, like, you hear from the dirt sheets, like I said, I don't know how credible they all are, but it's like, oh, yeah, Punk's in good faith, like, him and Tony Khan, yada, yada, yada. Then it's like the next day, him posting on, like, Instagram or something, like, oh, fuck you, and all this other shit, like, then he calls a stir, and they're, like, back on the same page, and now we're getting this stuff with Ace Steel. It's like, I understand you're a friend, but, like you said, he's so irrelevant to the show. It's like, if that's really holding you up, I mean, that's a you problem, dude.
No, it's totally a Punk problem. I mean, if Ace Steel is the holdup here, that's ridiculous. I mean, if it was almost anything else, I'd be like, okay, depending on what it is, maybe, whatever. If Ace Steel is part of the problem here, that's the problem. That is a problem. I mean, come on. Who the fuck cares? I mean, apparently Impact reached out to him and wanted to bring him in, and he turned that down with the belief that he was either going back to WWE, where he served originally as an agent or a producer, whatever, in NXT before they cut him a couple of years ago. And I don't think that was due to bad behavior. It was just due to the fact they had budget cuts and COVID and whatever. Triple H's people were being like, oh, whatever. Didn't sound like he had a lot of issues backstage until the fight, but I mean, all it takes is one incident to really change the perception of a person, and that shit was just inexcusable. He's not CM Punk. I mean, if CM Punk bit someone, would he still be there? Probably, because he's CM Punk, but Ace Steel is not CM Punk. He's completely expendable and not necessary on the roster. But like you said, this whole Punk situation has been one giant fucking mess. Do you expect him to still be on the show? Do you think they'll still be announcing him at some point, or he'll just show up in seemingly Chicago? Or are they even going to do the show in Chicago? We still don't know where that first show is going to be on June 17th.
I mean, at this point, if what's being reported is true, I honestly have no idea. I feel like I don't know if it's his attitude or just like the way he is. It's like the weather. I feel like it changes every day, and he is a big draw, so I understand why he wanted back. He has got hurt a lot lately. I mean, if the whole point of the show is to be based around him and he's not coming back, I mean, that seems like that would kind of be a no-good deal there. But I think he will. If I was taking an educated guess, I say he will. I think just it really comes down to how bad he wants to come back. I mean, obviously the whole stuff with him going to Impact, WWE, like that's been drama too. So I think he'll come back. I say it's like 60-40 him come back. I feel like there's a chance he might not. So we'll see. But I just like I said, if the whole thing is the whole Ace Steel thing, he's just a pain in the ass at that point.
Yeah, and they don't even need him back. I mean, again, coming from a Punk guy, I want to see him back. I think he injects a lot into the product. I don't think they need him back by any means. It is pretty embarrassing that they would have him set up to be at the upfronts and present and, be a part of the announcement that he's going to be on the show, blah, blah, blah. And then this whole thing falls apart last minute. He's not there. It's not a good look for AEW. Because apparently I would assume TNT was under the, assumption that Punk would be on the show. and now he might not be due to this whole thing. I mean, it's part of Punk's problem, obviously, like we said. It's just not a good look. It's not a good look. Hopefully they can work it out. Maybe they still bring back that goof anyway, which I'm not in favor of at all. I mean, I don't work there. It just seems like that would not be... I mean, there's already enough animosity over bringing Punk back in the first place. I'm not saying you can justify it, but I can see why it makes sense, because Punk's the star that he is, but compared to Ace Steel, Steel is not necessary. You don't need to bring in all of Punk's friends to one show for him to work with, just for him to be happy. It's so fucking dumb. And I left out, the whole part where Punk responded on Instagram. He called out Brian Alvarez. That whole shit's a mess. I mean, that's not that it's not relevant, but it's not really worth getting into. This whole thing has just been chaos. And again, it adds to the aura. I mean, looking at the sole positive of this, it adds to the aura of will he be there, will he not be there? A lot like when he first showed up a couple of years ago, and they built that entire First Dance edition of Rampage around, will Punk be there, will he not be there? And obviously turned out to be an amazing moment. Is it really worth it? The further along we go in this process, the answer is probably no, to be perfectly honest with you. Like responding on Instagram stories, like what the fuck are we doing here? Like he's putting shit on his story, like come on, dude. I'm not saying he has to stay quiet and eat shit, but I mean, he's like putting out videos and stuff, and he doesn't want people talking about him, even though, I mean, he's getting more people to talk about him by responding. So just by engaging, it's just kind of only adding more fuel to the fire, and that's just the sort of person that he is. So we'll see how it plays out. Maybe that's why the announcement from Tony Khan last night was so underwhelming, because he announced an announcement for this week, last week, and the announcement ended up being, he goes, it's a grand follow-up to one of the biggest announcements in AEW history. Okay, we found out Collision. And his big follow-up was, these are the 6 or so cities that we're going to be in for the next month and a half, or the next 2 months. But we're not going to announce the first week until next week. That sounds so convoluted. I feel like the Punk stuff had to do with that, but that's my own speculation.
I mean, that's the only thing I could think of. I mean, I think it'd be tough to say, the first show's going to be in the United Center in Chicago if there is, like, legit heat or thought that Punk won't be there.
Yeah, they might move the show. If Punk is not going to be there, it sounds like if they can't work this out in the next 6 days, they might put the show somewhere else, because you're not going to have the show in Chicago with people hoping and assuming he'll be there, and then he's not there. I mean, it's not, a lie on AEW's part to say, he's going to be in, then he's not. I mean, that's different. That's false advertising. They would just be hoping that he would be there, and when he doesn't show up, that's not AEW's fault, but they might just want to avoid that altogether by not having it in Chicago at all. So we should have a better idea by next week. This whole situation's been so back and forth. I didn't think Punk would be back in AEW at all, honestly. I thought they would just let him go at some point. They would work something out. And it sounds like he is on his way back. And honestly, looking at this roster, I would love to see him and Samoa Joe. I know that was the rumor last week. Him and Andrade would be nice. Him and all the WWE people, I guess. But Malachi Black, a rematch with MJF. Powerhouse Hobbs he has history with. Any of those people would be pretty cool. FTR working with them. Just one last quick Punk note. Did you see the report about him wanting to work? I mean, I guess the idea was that it would make sense for him to come back and feud with Jericho, which that's such a Jericho thing. Of course, Jericho wants to work with Punk now because he's the one that's everyone's talking about, and he can not leech off of it, but I mean, that just, who gives a shit? I really have no interest in seeing Jericho and Punk for the upteenth time in 2023. He wants to work with Joe. And not to say they haven't worked together. They have a lot of history. But that's a fresher feud to me. That has more potential, more than a one-off. It can get Joe back in a prominent position on the show. I'm over the JAS stuff anyway. That'd be terrible. Him working with Garcia and Guevara. Get the fuck out of here. I would like to see Joe and Punk. I feel like if they went in that direction, that'd be a great first match to do in Chicago on that first edition of Collision, assuming everything goes well.
Yeah, I'd rather see that than Jericho. Jericho's already sapping all the popularity of Adam Cole, so there's no need for him to then go to Jericho. So I'd rather see him and Joe anyways.
I agree.